Hi, everyone. It's Jane Celia Hatch, because the star. Happy late St. Patrick's Day. The energy of spring is upon us. The equinox is coming up on the 20th. And I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about power animals, our ancestors. I'm going to really focus on the Irish ancestors right now, and spirit guides, which are all integral to shamans and shamanic healing. And they're also just kind of integral to being here incarnate with power around us, meaning ancestors and power animals, even the middle world realm, which is where the leprechauns live. And there's nothing new under the sun. So the concept of leprechaun came from somewhere. And I believe, and I think I've read that there was an Irish word for water spirit, Leprechaun or something like that. So I think that was the origin of leprechaun, was a water spirit. So all of these spirits live like your ancestors can live in middle world, but generally they're in upper world. The fairy spirits, the leprechaun energy, the spirits of earth, wind, fire, all the four major spirits, they all live on middle world. If you're calling upon ancestors, they generally live in upper world. So you want to call upon the loving and compassionate ancestors, because not all of our ancestors are helpful. So some of them can actually be very detrimental. You know, if they have unresolved issues when they passed over, like alcoholism or greed, it gives them a very low vibration. Those are the ones that are generally still or can be in middle world. So you want to be careful when you're calling in energy, if you do shamanic healing, that you're calling in the spirits of love and compassion. So I wanted to focus on Celtic shamans and Celtic ancestors and Irish ancestors, and the importance of keeping a connection, because it's also like the power of land, where you live on the earth. Your ancestors are there, and they will provide you, even if it's just the vibration of them that has gone into the earth from maybe decades or centuries of being on that earth or being near that tree, that the earth has absorbed the vibration of your ancestors. So that's the power of land and tribe, and why indigenous people all over the world, whether it was Celts or Native American, Ahuna, or Aboriginal, the power of the land is strong. A part of it is because your ancestors are buried there. So that's the actual, ash or the physical remains, that may be, part of the dirt, but it's still, there's an empowerment there because you're vibrationally the same. And also it can be infused in, like, the energies of the trees have seen, like, if you're around a tree that's been there for 300 years, they know your ancestors, and they may already have a sense of love for you if they loved your ancestors. So even though our ancestors are gone before us, there's still power in calling them in or being on the land where they existed. That's why, like, indigenous people have that sort of earth power to a degree, because they're absorbing and they're surrounded by the protection and love of their ancestors. So I was going to do just a really brief overlook on ancestors, really focusing on the Irish. So this is Scottish. Some of if you're Scottish or Irish, Celtic, this is what some of your ancestors might have looked like. And I'm showing these pictures because we think that everybody looks like us to a certain degree, and throughout the centuries and the generations, of course, your ancestors look a lot different and dress differently. And you may, if you're doing shamanic work and you're calling in your ancestors, it's almost good to know what they look like so that you can recognize them. You can also ask your power animal, that you always should have with you, is this my ancestor? And they'll give you an answer. But also, if you recognize the clothing, the demeanor, the presentation of your ancestors, you can more easily note them in the spirit world. So here's another Irish. This is Irish. I think I got this from, I can't remember the site, but it is 2 Irish farmers. That looks very, very old. So if you're Irish and you see these guys, they might be your ancestors. So I also wanted to point out, it is really good to honor your ancestors, because what they may have overcome to get your people where they are, we forget. So in the 19th century in Ireland, I'm just going to read, this is from Galway. No electricity, there was gas lamps and candles. There was no cars. People walked or went by coaches from place to place. Many Irish people extremely poor and lived in dreadful conditions. In the 19th century, Ireland experienced the Great Famine, which is probably the most significant and devastating event in Irish history. Many people either died of starvation or hunger or emigrated to America or Britain. So this is really amazing, because you think a century later, or even 50 years after, like 1956, 1960, one of the Kennedys who immigrated from Ireland had become president of the United States. So what those people did to get their ancestors out of poverty, I think we forget. This is the working class Irish in the 19th century. And you see like the Peaky Blinders caps. The Irish, they had some very, very, very difficult, especially coming to America, and also the Great Famine. I think it killed millions of Irishmen. Life was not the same for all children during the 19th century. The kind of life a child had in the 19th century depended on its family. The working class had few luxuries. They ate poor food, worked long hours, and many children died of disease. So not only here's working children, they had the Irish, especially when they came to New England and Boston, the Puritans ran the show there, and the Irish had the most low-level jobs, and including, I just wanted to show this one. This last little boy was a chimney sweep. He was only 5 years old, and a lot of them didn't survive. So in this particular lineage, if you're Irish, some of your ancestors had to work very hard to get themselves out of that situation and into more profitable and more humane conditions. I think that was a factories. Yeah. Children worked in factories, the Irish children. They lived on the streets. So when you're calling in your ancestors, you also want to give thanks to them, because if you're living a better life, it is because in part of your ancestors. So you give thanks for everything they've done for you after you call them in. And again, you only call in your loving and compassionate ancestors. So you eliminate anybody in your past who has an agenda or has unhealed issues. But ancestors are very, very important to every lineage, no matter what your lineage is, because they know you, they know your DNA. They know how to support you. And it doesn't matter where you're from on the planet, whether it's, the Huna shamans in Hawaii or Australia, Russia, Siberia. Actually, the word shaman comes from Siberia. The Native American, the Celtic. You all have ancestors, and they all can empower you, not just as a shaman, but as a human, living on the planet, going about your daily activities. If you can somehow honor your ancestors, it will empower you in a sense, because they'll come in closer and they'll provide, maybe information in a dream, or, protect you. You're walking down the street. So, and it's your ancestors that do this for you, not anybody else's ancestors, because they know you and they love you. Love, that's the power of tribe, is love. They're coming into your energy field because of love, and they know you because they are you. In a way, it's the same blood. So your ancestors are really important in everyday life. And also, if you became a shamanic practitioner and you wanted more power, say to do more healing, or to bring information to another client, your ancestors who know you very well, it just will give you protection and power, and sometimes even information. I thought this was really interesting. This is an artistic image of the Irish. I think it's 17th century, 18th century, early 18th century. Trying to, the story under it, and I thought I had it, maybe I do as I go along, is the Irish brought Christmas in a way, but they weren't allowed to celebrate it in Boston, and they were getting fined, and that's sort of the Puritan, going, no. So the law, many decades later, the law changed, but it shows to me how rooted the Irish were in some of the earth ceremony, because Christmas was put together with Christ's birth, because the original Celtics celebrated the seasons of the planet and the changing of the earth and the equinoxes, and it was part of it was built into survival, because when they honored the goddesses and the gods of the season, it brought more crops and more food and more bounty, and back then that was everything. That was life or death. When the Great Famine came, some people believe it was constructed, and I can't remember all the details, but it was a very long story, that it was actually kind of an execution of millions of Irish, and I believe by the British. So they left, a lot of them left and came to America. So if you're an Irish and you have your relatives and your ancestors have fought long and hard to get here and to get you into a better life. So this is generally in a shamanic journey, you will often call in your ancestors, the gods and goddess of your particular tradition, and power animals. Those are the three major groups. So this is the goddess Danu. There's many names for her, but she was basically the Celtic mother goddess, the bringer of life. And many say that the gods and goddesses were once human that evolved into gods and goddesses. And she was the leading, most present goddess of the Celts. Danu was her name. And of course, this is a stylized version, but it depicts, some of the values, the green, and the earth, and the Celtic, that's a Celtic knot up there. So that this is another aspect of shamanic journeying, as you call in your ancestors again, and your gods and goddesses. And it's not idolizing a false god. All these gods and goddesses are part of God. They're just a more condensed version and have a specific medicine or healing. So she was considered the goddess of Mother Earth and the creator. I mean, she was, you know, almost on par to God. She was the Celtic Mother Earth goddess. So if you're Irish, you would call upon Danu, Saradrin, Eri. There's several. There's probably a dozen at least of Celtic goddesses that are deeply steeped in the goddess tradition and the Celtic tradition. So this is, I can't pronounce it, but she was considered the Lady of the Beasts. She's an Irish goddess. And her name, Fledaeus, is an Irish goddess of ancient origin of woodlands and wild things. Her name means doe, and she rode a chariot drawn by deer. She was considered a deer goddess, but she owned magical cows. Cattle were considered in ancient Ireland valuable and made up the wealth of the chieftain. And here's another picture of her. Now, almost in every culture, they're like, you know, if there was African, Aboriginal, they have the same goddesses and gods. They just have different names. Because it's all one God, really, and God represents himself, herself in a million different ways. And these are some of the ways God expresses himself, is through these deities. So everybody picked it up. Well, no matter where you were on the earth, you just have a different skin color or different, you know, animals around. So this would be another goddess that you would call upon if you're from an Irish descent. Again, she may know you, she may know your relatives, she may know what your weaknesses and what your strengths are because you're part of her tribe. Saradwin is the goddess of transformation and magic, and she is also an Irish goddess. This is very stylized, but Saradwin is always pictured with a cauldron. She's not often shown as a crone here, but sometimes as a triple goddess, maiden, mother, crone, because she embodies all of life and all ages, and she stirs up to create new life. And now Saradwin is another goddess that if you are Irish or Celtic descent, she is of your lineage, she is of your power. She could help you or give you information or protection. So the last one is, I thought I had a bigger picture of her. Yeah. This is definitely stylized, but this is the goddess that we call Erin, and I actually named one of my daughters after this goddess. It's also what they named Ireland after. She's called Abundance, and there's another spelling for Erin in Ireland. It's E-I-R-E, and it's pronounced Idre. So she is another goddess that if you have Irish or Celtic descent, you would call upon. And as a shaman, you'll start to feel their energy and you'll get used to it if you call in again and again. And again, when you see an altar and say there's a goddess Saradwin on there, or, you know, Idre, you know that shaman or even that person is forming a relationship with that energy of that particular goddess. So the next category, we did ancestors and then gods and goddesses. And then the next group of beings that shamans work with is power animals, and fox is just central to Celtic shaman ancestry and medicine. The oldest skeletal remains, I think, that's been identified was Celtic. They think there was fox bones in there and other figurines. So they think that the 60,000-year-old skeleton remains was a Celtic shaman. It's in my master's degree. If you want to read it, it's on my website, BethesdaStar.com. So foxes were just central to Celtic and Irish folklore. So there's another category in addition to the power animals. It's the middle world beings, and one of them was Leprechaun. So there's also the fairy world, which are also called brownies. And, America doesn't so much, except for the Kachina, the Native Americans don't always really believe in middle world spirits, but in some European countries, even construction workers, they ask permission from the middle world spirits that are living there if they can begin. And they said when they don't do this, and this was in one of Sandra Inkerman's books, that they have all kinds of problems and shutdowns and delays. But if they work in harmony with the spirits of middle world, like the Leprechaun, things are much more harmonious. So again, if you're Irish, Celtic, these spirits may have known you in other lifetimes, or they knew your ancestors, they knew your grandmother or your great grandmother, and they know you and they love you. And love is really critical in power. Because power meaning infusing yourself with your own God self. So along with the power animals is the spirit beings of middle world. I have some cards from, it's the Druid Animal deck. And I think I've covered up the name. And this is a power animal deck. And these are other animals from Celtic tradition that can be used in a shamanic journey, and not used in that sense, can be called upon. That's owl. The Celts really honored the cow. And of course, fox. And stag, which I usually have in the beginning as my intro. So this was for everyday people, as well as anybody that wants to study shamanism and shamanic healing. If you're interested in shamanic workshops and really learning how to deeply connect with your ancestors and your power animals and the middle world spirits, the best thing is a shamanic healing workshop. I am offering one next month online through Zoom. It'll be really fun. It'll have activities that you can do on your own land. And of course, shamanism is perfect for online because it's all in the energy world. And you can go on the earth wherever you are to sort of follow-up activities. So if you're interested, please go to BethesdaStar.com and go under workshops. It's beginning, I think, May. So again, happy St. Patrick's Day. If you are Irish, you have a very, very rich history. And I don't necessarily like to use the word pagan because somehow it got a bad term. It basically means being connected to the earth, but you have a very strong heritage in the magic and beauty of the earth and nature and the nature spirits. So call upon your ancestors, your loving and compassionate ancestors, the power animals, the Celtic power animals, and also the loving and compassionate middle world spirits. And again, if you really want more teachings on this and deeper understanding and more instruction, please go to my website, BethesdaStar.com, and go under workshops. So hope everybody's doing well. Lots of love.